Welcome back. My name is BasilMillwood, and today's video is actually going to be about the Mengarini variation, or also known as the Mengarini Gambit. I also like to call it the A3 Sicilian. Now, this is my first video on an opening, and honestly, when I did my research on it, I think this may be a bit too in-depth for just a video, so I'm going to only cover some of the lines, but the full PGN study, if you will, of this line, of this opening is going to be in the description down below of the video. So if you want to go look it up yourself, you're free to do it. And I used both Lichess for the study feature. I used Chessbook to figure out what moves are played and what not, and I used Sessify actually to see what the engine thinks at some points. So how I usually approach learning an opening is actually not to go through all the things I just did. I usually just take Chessbook and look at what's the most played master moves, or moves in master games. But the question comes down to it is, what is my opinion of the A3 Sicilian, which, if you guys want to see what it looks like, it's if the position happens after E4, C5 and A3. And it's now officially the Mengarini variation. I feel there's nothing wrong with learning theory, but it's also more important to learn why the moves are played, like what's the ideas of the opening. And also, memorization of moves isn't bad, but it's very important not to get caught up in the idea of that the memorization is what you need to win. Because memorization isn't bad for learning your opening, but at some point you have to think for yourself. And if memorization takes that away from you, that's not a good thing. You'll never get better at chess, if you will. And also, the opening shouldn't be the reason you win. There's nothing wrong with trying to find an opening that fits you or is just a very good opening to get the best chance to get maybe just a slight advantage out of the opening. But almost no serious game that was 30 moves long or 40 moves long was decided by the opening. So, all of that is to say, you can study this. I don't think the opening is bad at all. It's not the most played move at all when it comes to E4, C5. It's the computer, Stockfist itself says that at most you're looking at, like if it's the most challenging or best line, you're looking at equality or minus 0.2 in black's favor. But I've looked at some of the lines and it looks to me more like that white might have the easier time to play, which is already a good sign. And secondly, it's definitely not a bad move. Yes, you might draw, but that's again looking at top level. And even top level players, I think, can win or lose these positions. It's not fully drawn. The computer will draw this, of course, but it's the computer. It's not people. And that's not to say people are bad, it's just to say that the computer is extremely good. And I think this is where I'll actually fully go into the opening now. So I think I've said everything that I felt I needed to say. So, if the reason you play A3 is to stop a knight or a bishop to go into B4, you're not playing, first off, in the spirit of the opening. And secondly, I would actually say that's just not a good move. I would much rather play knight f3 in that case, because you can always play a3 later if the need arises. A knight f3 at least develops a piece and gives you a chance to get closer to castling. Your position is better. But the reason a3 is played is in fact not to stop the piece. a3 is played as sort of like a stepping block to play b4 later, or more likely next move. And if you're wondering, hey, but yeah, why? Well, it's close to a gambit actually. This line, it's in fact, in a sense, a delayed wing gambit. Because if you play e4, c5, b4, this is called the wing gambit. a3 is just included to say it's still a gambit, but it's not as big a gambit. But as you will see in some of the lines, it's pretty much a gambit-esque move. Still, opening still. And the most popular move that you'll find people play in positions like that Sicilian players will play is knight c6. Which makes sense, you're developing a piece and you're going on your way. But this allows white to play b4. Now, again, this again makes you think, but isn't this just a gambit? And you're 100% right. You're giving up 2 pawns to get a lot of activity and take this full center. And you'll see in a moment what I mean. As when, and again, so that we're clear, there's a reason why it's best to take, or rather actually not to take, but still, it's a very natural move. So c takes on b4 and a takes on b4. And now, of course, knight takes. You're up a pawn. Why not? And in fact, this is the preferred, well, if black takes, this is the preferred line. But now white gets to win tempo on black, and, well, just take the full center. And that's pretty much what white wants, is a strong center and to develop fast after this. If you look at the position, yes, white has only made pawn moves at this point, but he has the center. And secondly, black has made 3 moves with his knight, which is something generally considered not a good idea to do at the opening, to move the same piece multiple times. So even though white is not necessarily playing the best, it's still working well. And the following move is d5. The most popular move in this position is d5. And you take on e5, queen takes, and now you might be wondering, but okay, you don't have knight c3 because, well, you don't have any real tempo to play. And secondly, maybe you're thinking c4 to kick the queen away, but that does not work, as the queen will most likely take on d4. And a queen trade will ensue, and black is very behind in, quick development and stuff, but it's better, I would actually think. Not sure if the computer agrees, but my initial impression is black is better. So the move actually is knight a3, and this is the part where it's good to know theory, to know what the ideas are as well, because that's part of theory. You need to know what the moves are, and you need to know what the ideas are in your opening. And the thing with the Mengarini is, it's a very aggressive opening, where castling may not even happen for white. And secondly, it's to play very develop easily and fast. But again, the main idea is just to attack very harshly. Which makes it if you will, it's playing on thin ice. If your attack doesn't work, or if you make a single mistake, it will cost you the game. So knight a3, the idea here is twofold. One of the ideas is to play knight b5, possibly forking the rook and queen, but also it allows bishop c4. Now the most commonly played move in this position, which by the way is not, it's a mistake, is e5. And again, the idea makes sense of saying, well, I'm gonna take, or if you take me, I'll take your queen. So you take me, I take your queen, I'm happy. If you take me, but again, I don't think black will really want to take on d4 as it's wasting sort of time. You don't need to do that. You can just develop instead. But playing e5 allows the move knight to b5, which is the very threat I mentioned, and for reason, and it's also protected by the bishop. Now you've got a very tough question as black. You don't really want to move your queen, but at the same time it might just be the best move. And again, one of the other ideas is just to move your king. But stuff is slowly, I would say, spiraling out of control. So after knight b5, black could play bishop to d6, but that just allows white to play bishop c4. Now it's kicking the queen, and the queen needs to move. And many players have played queen e4 here, and you just block that with knight e2. And now you're actually able to castle, and you have a lot of threats, because now in this position, knight takes on d6 is a very dangerous threat. That's why many players play bishop e8, just trying to say you can't fork me. And that's when you just play queen d3. This is 12 moves of theory in the most played move order, if you will. And again, you can see quite easily the threat, and the threat is to play bishop takes on f7, which will take castling rights away from the king. And there's just a lot of danger in this position. White has this big attack coming in, and if you look at the eval bar, you'll see that it's +2 for white, even though white is down 2 pawns, and this is how strong this position is. Now, I'm not going to give you more moves in this position. You have to figure it out yourself to find the best moves, because black can do a lot here. You could perhaps just, I don't know, move his knight to d8. I don't think it's a good move, but it's an option. You could move his queen. There's a lot of ideas that black could do, but now you've got a really good position as white, and it's up to you to find the best move. So let's go a bit back and look at the first crossroads at the beginning. So there is actually, let me be honest, after a3 there's a lot of moves that can happen, and I'll go through some of the most popular, but I'll stick to the main line, if you will, or not main line, but the most played move order. And that is when you have this. Just want to make sure I'm not fully mistaken. Okay, so there's actually a sort of branching line here, but it's not that deep, it's 8 moves deep. But what could happen here is that black says, I'm not going to take your second pawn, that's what you want. I'm going to play d6. Yeah, stopping you from playing e5, and well, I'm happy. But this is not correct. Or at least I don't think it's the best move. So d6, your move is going to be to play b5, just to say to the knight where to go. And you'll see how easy it is to get a very nice looking position. So a lot of these moves doesn't look like very natural. It looks like, what, it's just, I'm just making one move, attacking a piece, and then with these moves, and you're like, oh, but a lot of this are still working well. So after b5, the most played move is knight e5, because if you play d4, for example, c3 happens, and you don't necessarily have a lot of breathing room. So e5 happens, and d4 gets played, taking the whole center, and the knight moves to g6. And after that, then white starts developing pieces. So now white has a center, and also has some pieces developed. First off, I think his rook on a1 is developed because it's open. It's doing something. It's seeing the whole a file. It's first off also pressuring a7. So if the rook were ever to move, you could possibly take that pawn. Not that it's necessarily in that position a good move. It depends on the position, of course, but there's a lot of activity in this position for white, and black is sort of stuck, if you will. He's getting choked with the position. It's not flowing, whereas white's position is starting to flow at this point. Black plays f6 with the idea of just saying, okay, I'm developing a piece, and I'm also hitting your pawn. And the move that I found to be the best move in this position is f4. And simply put, the idea is just you're going to play e5 at some point. And it's very good. Because at this point you can't play e5. He takes, you take, queen takes. I mean, it could work, but it's definitely not best. This just takes more center space, allows you to play knight f3 at some point. And yeah, it's just a good position. It's +1 for white. So that was the one variation at move 4, you'll find. The second variation appears on move 6 of this sort of most played line, which is e6. Black decides, instead of playing d5, taking some space in the center, I'm going to play e6. Just stopping you from pushing a pawn. I don't think it really necessarily stops it, but it's a good move. And the move that white plays in this position is starting to develop pieces. He's defending his pawn. He can't defend it with his knight, really. So the e4 pawn, so he's playing bishop d3. And at this point, black decides to use that very same concept of stepping stones, if you will, or building blocks, to play d5. Now there's a small difference here, but I'm just going to go through some of the ideas. So d5, and now you don't touch the center. If he takes you, that's fine. If he doesn't take you, that's also fine. You need a very good reason to take the pawn or push your pawn. Now you play this knight d2. Now you might be wondering why put the knight on d2, because it's sort of blocking your bishop. But there's reasons, and one of those reasons are that there's not necessarily a good square this side for the bishop right now, and a good position might just very well be to play knight to b3 and then c5 at some point, or even just to play bishop to a3. It's a developing move. But again, I'm just telling you what seems to be the best moves in this position. And the most played move that I found was actually to take on e4 by white. And now you also see why the knight was put here, to take. It's not the bishop that's going to take, it's the knight. That's also one of the ideas. You're protecting your pawn maybe 2 times, but the reason you're doing it is to take back with the knight, not with a bishop. And now the knight can go to c5, it can go to possibly at some point to d6. It's really a nice move. Now I don't find too many games in this position, so I'm not going to cover more moves. But this is just I'm just taking the most played line and going through some deviations, and then I'm going to look at the second and third most played lines. So d4, and the next move you'll find after move 6, so second deviation is d6. Interesting thing about d6 is I can just play d5, just asking the knight where he's going to go. Again, d4 is not possible, b4 is not possible, and knight a5 is maybe possible, but at the same time it's not actually. Because, yeah, it's not. If you're wondering why this is not possible, it's simply queen a4 check. Yes, the queen is protecting, but you're going to take this knight and be up a knight at the end of that line. So that's why that's not a move. So the knight is going to go to e5 once more. You've seen it previously in this position. And you play f4 here. Again, asking the knight where it's going to go, what it wants to do. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the best move for the knight. And in this position, you just play knight f3. You've got a very nice center. The white position is slowly choking because it made so many moves with one piece. It's not easy to develop, and that's what white wants out of a Mengarini. It wants a very active position, a position that's easy to develop. It's very attacking, and so yes. So black will now play g6. To try and get his bishop into the game, and now you again make a move that's aggressive, and it's simply queen to d4, saying if you put your bishop on g7 next, I'm gonna take it and your rook is next. And black is forced to play knight g to f6, and that's where e5 comes in. e5, d takes on e5, f takes on e5. And the position is just slowly but surely, getting worse for black. And in a sense, you might even ask the question, where did he go wrong? And that's a strength, I think, of the Mengarini. It's really not, it doesn't look good at first glance, but the more you look at it, the better it looks. And I would actually consider playing the Mengarini myself as white, if it wasn't the fact that I already play c4, and I do enjoy playing English. But yeah, this is a really good weapon, I think. Also opening against the Sicilian. And not a lot of people that play black will actually know this variation because of how little it is played. So, back to move 8 this time in the main line, where we played knight a3, and you remember seeing that black played 5, which was a mistake. But there's 2 other moves black sometimes play in this position, and one of them is e6. After e6, yes, play b5 once more, because nothing changed. You're still able to play b5, which is the really interesting part about it. There is no way to really stop this at all easily. You'd probably have to play a6 to stop it. But again, even that doesn't stop it, because a6, I'm still going to play knight b5, because if you take my knight, I'm going to take your rook, and that rook is also. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, so instead of e6, you play a6. I'm still most like I can still play b5. And you can't take, because if you take, I take your rook and hit your bishop. Now, it's not to say that's the base move for white in that position, by the way. But I'm just saying it's not that easy to stop the threat of b5. So e6, knight b5, and the queen actually drops back to queen d8 to stop it, which is in fact I think a slightly better move. But now black plays d5. And again the queen can't take, because the moment the queen takes, you fork the queen and king. So the pawn has to take. And that's when you play bishop f4. Now it's almost impossible to stop this, or stop you from winning a rook. And in this position, well, black plays queen e7 check, and now he is playing bishop e2, and saying, I'm fine, you still have this problem, don't see how you're going to stop it. And now the most played move is knight to e5, and the queen s6. Because the knight can't really move. You're threatening to win the knight straight up. There's no way to, say it's not the case. You're just threatening straight up to take the knight, which I find to be incredibly fascinating about some of these positions you might get. So I think I've spent enough time on the main line. So I'll be actually looking at some of the lines you'll get after a3. Instead of knight c6, another move you might get is d6, which actually isn't that bad, but it's still interesting with stuff you can get. And there's a lot of lines, a lot of moves here, say a lot of the stuff transposed, so I don't actually want to look at d6. Rather, I want to look at the two other lines that I've seen masters play, because the masters database has 3 moves that's being played most often against a3. One is actually g6, which I believe is actually the best response black can give. The second line is knight e6, and then the last line is knight c6. So let me cover the lines that masters play, and the rest you can go look up yourself. So e6 happens. This is sort of like a French variation of the Sicilian, a very solid opening. And the move is still to play b4, because that's simply the idea in most of these lines, is to play b4. And even though the computer goes and screams this is an inaccuracy or maybe even a mistake in some cases, okay, I don't think a mistake, but it definitely says in some places it's an inaccuracy. Looking at the positions you get at some point, I don't feel it's a bad move. I feel, objectively speaking, it's a good variation. So after b4, black again has a lot of moves like knight c6, even b6. But yes, knight c6 is the most played move. You're saying, I'm not taking. And again, black could take, and I'll show you that line. The problem with... Okay, so actually, the more sensible move is to take. All the other moves doesn't fully work. Like, for example, knight c6. Yes, play b4. And again, you've got this big problem for black. Black has to actually sort of go to e5, if I remember it correctly. But like, if he goes to d4, which looks like a natural position, you see how fast the eval bar rises, and it's because of c3. You can again take the full center more or less, and well, the knight is lost. Pretty much, okay, the knight will go here, at least taking a pawn with him. And that almost looked like a natural move, but it's not. It's a blunder. So, but again, so I'm actually going to go down the line that I feel is more what you could expect to find, since the bishop is protecting the pawn. The pawn takes on b4, and bishop takes on b4. And again, you have this very same position that you found with knight c6, where c3 is the first move. the bishop drops back to e7, and d4 is his next move after that. And you'll see this looks a lot similar to the variation where knight c6 was removed. Also, I see now this is also transposition to the wing gambit master variation. Black again plays d5 in the most played line, and he has played e5. And if I remember correctly, yes, this is the very fun looking line that I found, which is incredible if you get this on the board. This is one of the main reasons I'm like, I want to play this variation, because this looks awesome to get on the board. And after e5, black plays knight c6, developing, because, well, he can't put the knight on f6. He'll probably play f3, but if you play f3, the queen comes in and all kinds of stuff happens. To actually go down that line, I'll show you in action me looking at what could happen. Yes, develop a bishop to d3, and the problem is if you take, I'm probably going to just check you on h5, and if you block with your pawn, I take the pawn of my bishop, and it's very bad for black. So the line that's most played is knight c6, still bishop d3 to keep that whole idea in mind, a6 to stop. I honestly don't know why this is the most played move, but I think it's a case of black doesn't want a piece to go to b5, and it's just doesn't really know what to do, how to get out of this position. He might even think of playing b5 bishop b7, and so bishop d3, a6, and then h4. And this is a very fun looking move. You might be wondering, but isn't that hanging a pawn? And in fact, it is sacrificing a pawn. This pawn right here isn't defended enough against the bishop and the queen, but it's way too dangerous. It's akin to losing the game if it takes. The computer thinks the best move here is to play h5, but if the bishop takes, you'll see this is the move. And it's a very disgusting looking position, because, well, first off, you're just threatening straight up of winning the bishop. Secondly, if the bishop moves back to e7, it just gets worse because you take. And you can't really protect any of your stuff. So the move that computer actually wants is to fully give up the bishop on f6 to protect, f6 to protect the t7 pawn. So this is what I'm going to show you. I'm not going to go further into it, but it's just an incredible looking line to me. Again, let's go study the PTN I'm going to post below, because I think it's very useful to study. So back to a3, we're going to go to the last variation. And that variation is namely the g6 variation, which is the most played master move, and it is actually in my own repertoire against a3. But I don't go in depth on this move, and now I'm going to definitely go depth on in this position. So g6, and the move is still b4, still in the spirit of the Mengarini variation or gambit. So b4, and the move that black will play, there's a few moves. The most natural move and most played move is just simply take on to play g7, not bishop g7, and you'll really find there's a small difference between this variation and the other variations, because in this one you're actually threatening on move 3 to win a rook. So white has to play knight c3, and then c takes on b4, so a takes on b4, and Then black plays knight c2. b5 is the move, and knight to d4. And this actually looks fine for black, in fact very dangerous, because but now white will play f3. Now I've seen some and this is where the line actually ends that I found. The other line, which is more common, but it's not more common, but I think there's more moves in it. Yes, there's a lot more games I've found of it, and it is, well, B takes on C takes on b4, A takes on b4, and then you get various variations like bishop g7 and actually d6. d6 leads to, just allows white to take d4. There's a lot of the dangers gone. d4, black plays bishop g7. Interestingly enough, you ignore the taking of the pawn. You might be wondering, but what's wrong with why is it wrong to take on d4? And it's actually in the PTN down below as well, and it is, if he takes, it's a loss of a bishop. There's a few lines that you can go and look up yourself, but if this happens, I just take the bishop, and your rook is hanging in the corner. So it's just absolutely devastating if that happens. So instead of d6, they could play bishop t7. And with bishop t7, well, you just play d4 in this position. You don't need to play knight c3 anymore. Now there's two lines from here. I'm going to cover the first one, which is knight c6, just putting more pressure on d4, and you actually play c3, which I found to be interesting. You're sort of wondering, but why? Why not, play f3? That is a move that you're going to play at some point. But after knight f6, you play e5. It's more of like, I'm waiting for a move. And this is a very funny and interesting thing about this variation for white, is all of your moves up to this point was pawn moves. So the knight goes to d5 and you play b5. It's ridiculous. But all the moves are pawn moves. You have not made a single piece move. And still, white is actually better, which shows the importance of pawn play, but also, again, I think, in a sense, solidifies what I said. This opening is actually not bad. So going back to when white played d4, black could also decide to play d6 here instead. And now, again, the moves is a little bit different. Since there's no pressure on your position, you're going to play d3. And again, that line of the bishop takes could happen. So this is what I think. I'll end the video, as I don't want it to be an hour long. I can easily go through all the variations, but I think these are the biggest variations to talk about, and I actually wanted to post a video of somebody playing this, because I'm not going to try and play this and look like a fool in the process, because I don't know the opening well. And again, another thing to always remember about learning an opening, you will most likely have a high probability of losing your first few games playing it. Because, well, you don't know it. But once you start knowing the game, and this is also why it's very, very, very important to always analyze your games. If you're playing online, play your game and analyze it afterwards. If you're playing in a tournament with people or playing in person, yes, I don't expect you to always analyze afterwards immediately, but still go analyze it after you go home. Because if you're playing online, you have the full benefit of analyzing after the game. And that's how you improve on your gameplay and learn from it. And so, yes, so this is the video on it. But yes, I actually wanted to post like have a game played by two masters, with a player playing from Mengarini 1, and go through it to show you how he plays, how the ideas you've just seen sort of transfers. And again, not all these moves are per se the top choice for what masters would play, but it's close enough, I think. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've watched the full video, thank you. I would appreciate if you like it and leave a comment down below. I don't really mind likes and dislikes. Like, I think that's not needed. Just comment down below if you really liked it. Yes, like, but subscribe and comment down below. And, comment what you will want to see next. And yeah, till next time. Adios, amigos.